It begins with a paradox. A land of scorching deserts, endless sand, and almost no rivers somehow became one of the richest nations on earth. A kingdom that once rode on camels now commands private jets, super cities, and trillion-dollar sovereign funds. But here's the mystery. How did a family of nomads build a financial empire that can influence the global economy and even shape the fate of the US dollar itself? Because what few realize is that Saudi Arabia's power is not just about oil, it's about money, alliances, and control, built through a system that ties together Wall Street, Washington, and the Desert Kingdom. This is the story of how Arabia became a financial empire, a politics and power that still determines the world's future. Our story starts in the early 20th century. Back then, Arabia was a land divided by tribes, religion, and warlords. No cities, no infrastructure, no electricity, just survival in one of the harshest places on earth. Then came Abdulaziz ibn Saud, a desert warrior who united the tribes under his rule, creating the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1932. But there was one problem. The new kingdom was poor. Its main export was dates. The royal treasury barely had enough to run the state. The kingdom was large in land wealth, and then fate intervened. In 1938, and in a remote area called Dahran, American geologists made a discovery that would change everything. Oil, and not just a little, but one of the largest reserves in the world. That's when everything began to shift. The discovery of oil brought in a new kind of power, foreign corporations. The Americans arrived through the Arabian-American oil company Aramco. At first, Saudi Arabia didn't even have the technology or manpower to extract it, so the Americans built it all: refineries, roads, ports, and pipelines. By the 1950s, oil was gushing and the money started to flow. But it wasn't just oil that changed the kingdom, it was the relationship with the United States. America needed oil to fuel its post-war boom. Saudi Arabia needed security and investment. And so, a deal was struck, not written on paper but carved into geopolitics. You give us oil, we give you protection. It was the beginning of a partnership that still defines the modern world. Fast forward to the 1970s. The world was in chaos. Oil prices were rising, wars were raging, and the US dollar was collapsing after Nixon ended the gold standard in 1971. America needed a new foundation for its currency, and it found it in Saudi Arabia. In 1974, a secret agreement was made between the US and Saudi Arabia. The deal was simple and brilliant. Saudi Arabia would price and sell its oil only in US dollars. In return, the US would provide military protection and investment support. This created the Petrodollar system. Now, every country in the world needed US dollars because they needed oil. That meant a constant demand for US currency, keeping the dollar powerful and the American economy stable. And Saudi Arabia became the gatekeeper of the world's most valuable commodity. It was this moment, not the oil discovery itself, that turned Saudi Arabia into a financial empire. In the 1980s, Saudi Arabia was swimming in money. Skyscrapers rose from the sand. Palaces glimmered in the desert night. Billions were invested in schools, highways, and cities like Riyadh and Jeddah. But not all the wealth stayed home. Saudi Arabia began using its financial power as influence. It invested in Western corporations, US Treasury bonds, and global real estate. The royal family's ties with Wall Street deepened, and quietly, Saudi Arabia became one of the largest foreign holders of US debt. Every barrel of oil sold meant more dollars returning to American banks, and a cycle was created, a financial feedback loop that bound the two nations together. By now, Saudi Arabia wasn't just rich, it was powerful, and it learned to use that power strategically. In 1973, during the Arab-Israeli War, the kingdom led an oil embargo against the US and its allies. The result was fuel shortages, market crashes, and global panic. For the first time, the world realized that Saudi Arabia could move markets with a single decision. This wasn't just energy, it was economic warfare. And while the embargo hurt the West, it also proved a point. Saudi oil was not just a resource, it was leverage. Behind the scenes, the kingdom was evolving. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Saudi Arabia began transforming from a desert monarchy into a modern financial state. Banks expanded, investment firms emerged, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Public Investment Fund, PIF, began its rise. Today, the PIF controls over $900 billion, investing in everything from Uber and Disney to Lucid Motors and sports franchises. But there's a catch. For all its wealth, Saudi Arabia's economy was dangerously dependent on oil. And as the world began shifting toward renewable energy, that dependency became a threat. That's when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman MBS launched Vision 2030. Vision 2030 was not just a plan, it was a transformation. The idea: turn Saudi Arabia into a diversified, tech-driven financial hub, less dependent on oil and more connected to global innovation. Mega projects like NEOM, a $500 billion futuristic city, were announced. Saudi funds began investing in AI, clean energy, and entertainment. It was a declaration to the world: We're not just an oil kingdom anymore, but not everyone was convinced. Critics called it an illusion, a distraction from political controversies and human rights concerns. Still, the flow of money was undeniable. Wall Street came running. Investors, corporations, and tech companies all wanted a piece of Saudi Arabia's new vision. The Desert Kingdom was becoming a financial empire of the 21st century. Today, Saudi stands at a crossroads. Oil is no longer the uncontested king, but finance, technology, and diplomacy are the new weapons of power. The kingdom is strengthening ties with China and Russia, hinting at selling oil in yuan, not dollars. A direct challenge to the petrodollar system that built the US-Saudi alliance. If that shift happens, it could shake the foundations of global finance, because the petrodollar isn't just a system, it's the backbone of the modern economy, and Saudi Arabia is holding the wrench that could dismantle it. History has shown that empires built on one resource eventually face decline. Spain had gold, Britain had coal, America has the dollar, Saudi Arabia had oil, and turned it into money, power, and influence. But now, as the world moves toward green energy, digital currencies, and new alliances, the question remains: can a financial empire built on oil survive a world without it? First, control of resources is control of power. Saudi Arabia turned oil into a tool of global influence. Second, finance is the new battlefield. From Wall Street to Riyadh, money now moves faster than armies ever could. And third, empires don't last forever. They adapt or fall. Saudi Arabia's attempt to reinvent itself could define the next century. The story of Saudi Arabia is not just about oil, money, or power. It's a story about how nations reinvent themselves when the world changes. Because someday soon, when the oil stops flowing and the markets shift, only one thing will matter: who controls the next currency of power? Will it be oil, the dollar, or something entirely new? The answer, just like the desert, is still shifting. If you found this story insightful, subscribe for more documentaries that reveal the hidden forces shaping our financial world, because understanding money is understanding power.